Let me walk you through the latest project. This is an EZGO L6 Express, which is a limo 6-seater golf cart. This one's actually gas powered. And I've been working on this off and on with other projects. I finally got everything else done. The back seat put in, new battery. And after fixing everything, it wasn't running perfectly because there had been quite a bit of time after I rebuilt the carburetor where it just sat with gas in it. So now I'm going to take you through cleaning out the carburetor again, second time on this, because it just isn't running quite right. It's having the way these work, you step on the gas and first the electric motor will start to engage and move the cart really slowly, and if you step on it a little bit harder, the gas motor will kick on, and that transition is a little bit rough, and I think cleaning out the carburetor will fix it. So that's what this video is going to be. Let's get this carburetor off. Loosen this air hose. Now we can get to these two bolts. Awesome. Recovered. There. Can take that whole bolt out. Now that's not supposed to happen. That's supposed to stay, that stud is supposed to stay threaded in, and this end piece is supposed to come off, but it's pretty rusty, so the whole thing just came out. Not ideal, but not that big of a deal either. Now I've got a fuel line coming in right here. Before I disconnect that and fuel goes all over the place on these golf carts, you have a fuel shutoff switch right here. So I'm gonna turn that whichever way it goes. Anytime it's perpendicular to the line, that's going to be off. So now we've suspended fuel flow. There's still quite a bit in the line, so it could still leak, but it won't continue to leak. Just one little turn to loosen that up just enough to get it to come out of that channel it's in. Now I can remove this whole plate. And pay attention, the gaskets are still stuck to it. You don't want to lose your gaskets. All right, now I've just got the carburetor assembly. I'm going to take this little clip off. This connects it to the choke cable. Actually, I'm sorry, this is the governor right here. All right, now that'll pop right out. Set that off to the side for a moment. Now I can turn this, and there's a little hole up at the top, and you're just going to want to rotate the cable over, and then it should lift right out. Now that cable's off. Again, that's the choke cable. All right, with those disconnected, this should be able to slide off. And there's another gasket back here. So there's actually 3 gaskets on this particular carburetor. Slide this all the way off. Whoops, lost my light source. It's kind of precarious. Okay, gasket got a little bit messed up on the outside. And now you'll notice that the fuel line is still hooked up, and that's because I wanted it to be elevated before I disconnected, so fuel didn't just spill out. So let me move this, sneak this under some of these other lines that are over here. And now I can lift it up. The whole carburetor's out and up, and looks like I dripped a little bit of fuel out. And now I can disconnect this and keep the fuel line up high so that most of the fuel that was in it stays in that line and doesn't spill all over the engine. So I'll save you from that part. I'll disconnect it with the camera off and start filming again over on the bench. All right, here's the carburetor on the bench. And this is the choke plate right here. Richens up the fuel mixture, lets less air in, so you get more fuel to air ratio when you turn the choke on when it's trying to start cold. And then here's the throttle plate. On this side, down here, you've got the float bowl right there, and here's where fuel comes in. That line that I waited to disconnect until last. This thing's dirty and kind of rusty, but it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna take the nut off the bottom so that I can get the float bowl disconnected. There's a little washer on there. Always remove things slowly so that you don't lose washers, springs, check valves, things like that. And hold it right up and take that apart. Okay, there's a little bit of grit and junk at the bottom of the float bowl that I'm going to clean out. First I'm going to dump out that fuel. And then to the extent possible, just clean that out. I've cleaned this out a while ago, but then it sat for a while. And it doesn't take that long for fuel, a few months, to sit in a carburetor before the sediments will start to fall out of it, and the more volatile compounds will evaporate away, and you just get bad gas, and it leaves behind a lot of residue. So still got a stain in the bottom, but all the grime is gone. So that part's done. Here we've got the float. So the float, just like the flapper or the float on the back of your toilet, when fuel rises up in the bowl to a predefined level, this will stop the flow of additional fuel into your through this line into your actual float bowl, so it never overflows through the fuel pump. Back here you've got a little jet. Let's see if you can see through that. Carburetors are full of a bunch of tiny little passageways that can get gummed up. And I don't know if you can see it in the video, it doesn't look like you can, but I can see a little bit of daylight through that one, so I'm pretty sure that's not gummed up. But let me show you a little secret tool I use to clean out carburetors. You can use just about anything, but I like to take an old wire, an insulated wire, and just pull out a single or maybe a couple of strands. What's nice about this is it's copper, so it's a soft metal. It's not going to gouge or scratch up even if you've got like an aluminum carburetor, which many of them are. If it's cast iron, definitely won't scratch that because it's softer than most of the metals you're going to come into contact with, and it's nice and thin, but it's strong enough to scrape off any gunk, and it'll make it through just about any passage. Oh yeah, there you can see a little bit of light, see, through that hole. But I still run a copper wire through just to make sure that it's cleaned out all the way. So there's our first one. That's clean now. I'm going to take this float out of the way. It's just got a pin in the back. You can slide that through. Be careful. Turn this over and hold it down when you do this, because there's usually a spring-loaded valve stopper on the other side. So that's been removed. And I'll slowly pull the float bowl out. And that's the piece I was talking about right here. You've got this piece, and when the float goes up all the way, it's got a pointy rubber tip, and that will block the passage to not allow any more fuel to flow into the float bowl. And the passage it blocks is right there. There's a little hole at the bottom of that passage, and you can just kind of see it, and that's what it'll block. Now I know we're getting plenty of fuel to the float bowl. That's not the problem. It's more of it doesn't want to idle very well. It'll run at high speeds, but it doesn't idle great. So I know this isn't the problem, but as long as I have it open, I'm gonna run my wire through there too. Clean that out. A lot of people will just spray these with throttle cleaner or carb cleaner. I do that at the end. First I try and clean everything out, scrape off all the gunk, make sure all the passageways are open, the stuff has been released from the sides, and then spraying it with carb cleaner. We'll just rinse it all away, anything that's been freed up but is still sitting in a passageway. I think that's a smarter way to do it. If you spray it with carburetor cleaner at the beginning, just like washing your car, if it's got dirt caked on the sides, you can spray it with water all day. That dirt's not going to go anywhere until you wipe it off with a rag or a brush of some sort. Then rinsing it off will actually do some good. Same thing in a carburetor. Okay, and then down at the end of this channel right here is your main jet. And that is the one that is going to, there's going to be a passageway inside that leads to. And so that's the most important one to have clean. And I'm looking in here. It's really hard to find an angle that I can see through, and I don't see any daylight at all through my idle jet. That's a problem. So let me see if I can run this wire through, and if that makes a difference. Another thing that can work really well when cleaning out a carburetor is compressed air. I don't have my air compressor on right now because I think I'll probably be able to do just fine with just these wires, but I can always turn it on if I need to. If you're doing a lot of work on cars and small engines, I highly recommend an air compressor. Okay, so I can feed that in there quite a ways. And let's see, just to illustrate the point I was making earlier, let's see if we can feed that all the way in, and then I'll show you inside the carburetor, see where it's popping out. Okay, you can see the copper wire coming straight through. And now you can see daylight. See that? That's the way you want it. All right, that's all the passages cleaned out. Now it's a good time to hit it with your carburetor cleaner. I've got throttle body cleaner here. That'll work just fine. Another thing you want to do when you're cleaning out a carb is right inside the throttle plate. This one again has been cleaned fairly recently, so it doesn't have much of an issue here, but you'll get some carbon buildup right where this thing closes, and it'll make it kind of gummy. It'll stick, and it won't idle very well. You can see some on this side, and you're going to want to clean that out really well. Again, I like to wipe it first, then spray it with carburetor cleaner, and then wipe it again, because otherwise that first pass you're just wasting carburetor cleaner for no good reason. And it's not like it's expensive, but it's not free either. If you don't work in a shop, you got to go buy new bottles all the time. Just unnecessary, waste a bunch of chemicals. But some guys are real liberal with the carb cleaner. And you can spray this stuff into little passages. You can see couple little passages right there, real small holes. You can spray it in there as well. If it worked, this can's empty. All on. Found a can with something in it. Let's do that again. A little more action. Wow, really? Okay, well, it's not great, but it is pumping it out. See what I'm talking about? Use too much throttle body cleaner and then you run out in the middle of a job. Highly irritating. All right, pretty big difference. Cleaned a lot of the carbon out of there. I'll spend a bit more time off camera cleaning it really well. All the different areas, but you get the general idea. You don't need to watch me clean something for 15 minutes until it's spick and span. but just get everywhere you can. Same thing over here on the choke side. And sometimes you'll clean out a carburetor and you'll think that you've made no difference. You won't have seen anything that was really obviously blocking it. You put it back together and it still runs so much better. So it's not always obvious when you've got it apart and you're cleaning it that you're making a difference. But don't let that dissuade you. Pretty much always worth doing. If you've got a carbureted engine that's sat for more than a month with fuel in it, it's not going to hurt to clean out your carburetor. Let's put it that way. In all likelihood, it'll help in some way or another. All right, putting this back together, you'll notice that this valve has a little connector on the back, and that slides into your float, into your float. So make sure that's in the right position, just like that, before you put this assembly back together. And then guide that in. Okay, now you can see that's where it's supposed to go. And now put your pin back through. You will notice on this pin that one side is crimped, so that side will not slide in. Start with the other side. Align the float bowl, the float. Slide that through. You don't need to hammer it into place. Just setting it into place is fine. Once the float bowl is over the top of this, it won't be able to slide itself back out. It won't be able to move out far enough for that to come off. When you put your float bowl back on, sometimes there's only one way these can go on. This one that's not the case. It can go on any way. So I'm going to put it on. I just happen to remember the way that it came on. This drain valve was on the side of the choke, so I'm putting it back on that same way. And here's my bolt that holds the float bowl on. Just a little bit to snug it. All right, that's it. Cleaned out. We're ready to put back on. Carburetor's finished and back on, and it definitely runs better, made a big improvement at speed, but I'm still having some of the same problems getting off of idle and for the cart starting. So next up, I'm gonna post another video about this where I'm going to rebuild the clutches, because I think the clutches are sticking and only giving me one gear ratio and making it so that the starter isn't just trying to crank the engine over, but it's actually trying to creep the vehicle forward, so it's giving it too low of an RPM to start properly. I think that's what the problem was all along. But look forward to that video. And obviously I also put the roof on. What a difference it makes with the roof on. These look so much better with a roof. So that's it for this video. Hope you learned something about rebuilding carburetors. Stay tuned for my next video about rebuilding clutches.